Twilight has its share of admirers and critics in equal measure, and few characters within the fandom are as widely loved or widely panned as Jacob Black. Throughout the series, he's a likable character, if a bit grumpy or headstrong at times, but the imprinting incident towards the end of the series left more than a few people scratching their heads, getting the previously beloved Jacob labeled as a weirdo at best and a child groomer at worst. The imprinting debacle aside, I wanted to discuss Jacob's backstory. Before he even became entrenched in the world of vampires and werewolves, he was an ordinary kid, attending the La Push school and looking after his wheelchair-bound father. Jacob's childhood isn't a particularly dramatic one, but he's dealt with his share of loss and heartache, even before having his affections rejected repeatedly by Bella. Before we continue, I'm Riley and this is Otherworldly Fiction. On this channel, I talk about fantasy books, discuss characters and lore, offer bookish opinions, and the occasional writing advice. If any of that sounds like your cup of blood, hit that subscribe button. Posts are on Fridays. Jacob's early life was fairly standard. He went to school accompanied by his two best friends, Embry Call and Quill Atira Jr., and he was the son of Sarah and Billy Black. He was occasionally taken to meet Charlie, as Billy and Charlie were the closest of friends, but Bella wasn't more than an acquaintance to Jacob. As children, they never formed a deep friendship, as Jacob saw her but sporadically during those summers Bella visited. It wasn't until Jacob was 9 that tragedy struck his family. His mother, Sarah, died in a car accident, leaving his sister stricken. Though Jacob was relatively sheltered from the event through his youth and the diligence of his sisters Rachel and Rebecca, the girls, being older, were greatly affected. Though they stepped into the role their mother had vacated, helping their father to raise Jacob, they, on Jacob's becoming a teen, both left Forks, too haunted by the loss of their mother to remain. Rebecca moved as far away as Hawaii, leaving the drizzly Forks behind for fine sand, hot temperatures, and turquoise waters. Once there, she married a professional surfer known as Solomon Finot. As for Rachel, she disappeared to go to school at Washington State University, visiting her family but rarely. With his sisters absent, Jacob was left to act as caretaker to his father. After developing diabetes, Billy became resigned to a wheelchair, though this didn't prevent him from getting around or visiting friends. Jacob, with so much responsibility, wasn't even bothered. His relationship with his father was good, though he tended to gloss over Billy's comments when it came to what he believed were myths, those stories of wolves and the so-called cold ones who were their enemies. When Billy expressed his misgivings around the Collins moving to Forks, Jacob chalked it up to an old man's superstition. It wasn't until Bella moved to Forks permanently that Jacob developed a real friendship with her. Their first meeting on the beach gave Jacob only a small role, mainly because Jacob, the star that he is now, wasn't originally intended to be more than a bit player. Initially created to be a stock character who gave Bella important information, he nevertheless impressed Meyer and her editor enough to warrant a larger role in the following novels. Bella always found Jacob easy to talk with, despite her own guilt over charming the information out of him, and Meyer felt the same. Billy attempted to dissuade Bella from seeing Edward, but, even knowing her boyfriend was a vampire, Bella brushed away Billy's concerns. Determined to protect his best friend's daughter, Billy roped his son into crashing Bella's prom, so that he could send a warning on his behalf. Jacob cringed at the assignment, and Bella could see Jacob's discomfort over what he had to tell her. But the prospect of having the money to finish putting his car together propelled him. Jacob told Bella that his father wanted her to break up with her boyfriend, making it clear as he spoke that he thought Billy's interference was silly. Of course, even by this point, Jacob's fate was already sealed. Though he wouldn't phase until he was 16, during the following school year, he was already showing signs of his impending transformation. He was remarkably tall, growing and filling out at a noticeable rate. And on catching Edward's scent on Bella, he was put off. Already, the vampire smell burned his nose. Edward also picked up on Jacob's reaction, and though he knew Jacob had technically broken the treaty, Edward let it go, more unnerved by Jacob's obvious interest in Bella. By the time he was 16, after being, no pun intended, dogged by Sam, Jacob learned the truth. He could transform into a wolf, and the Cullens, as his father already told him, were indeed vampires. Being a wolf complicated Jacob's relationship with Bella. With Edward out of the picture, Bella was reeling from her loss, and it was only Jacob who could help her to heal. Determined not to let Bella down, after promising to be there for her, Jacob urged Bella to search her own memory for clues. Once Bella deduced the truth, that Jacob was a werewolf, their friendship was able to resume, though hunting for Victoria often kept Jacob away. After being fished from the water following a foolish cliff diving stunt, Bella learned that Harry, father to Leah and Seth, had suffered a heart attack. This was actually the result of both of his children phasing for the first time, the shock of which sent him into cardiac arrest. Narrowly avoiding being killed by the Volturi, Bella managed to rescue Edward from destroying himself. However, when Edward and his family returned, the relationship between Bella and Jacob became strained. Thankfully, their bond was somewhat preserved by Victoria, whose presence forced the Cullens and the werewolves to work together. Given a common enemy, and the goal of protecting Bella, some members of the opposing factions, such as Edward and Seth, even managed to form friendships. Bella also realized her own feelings, and, desperate to prevent Jacob from throwing himself into battle, she admitted her feelings for him, kissing the teen in the process. Jacob came to accept that she still preferred Edward. Though it was painful, there was some comfort for Jacob in knowing that Bella did like him, and, more importantly, that Bella was aware of her own feelings, and therefore able to make a fair choice. Jacob's concerns around Bella actually becoming a vampire, however, remained, and in his grief he fled, as a wolf, tearing across the country. Even dipping into Canada, he lived as an animal, hoping to shut out his painful human memories. The idea that Bella, while human, would sleep with Edward sent him over the edge, so that he had to be dragged from her wedding. It wasn't until Bella returned, now pregnant, that Jacob would again be horrified by the effect of vampires on Bella's life. Jacob's life was twisted in several directions, as the revelation of what should have been an impossible pregnancy washed over him. Without thought, he rushed to Sam to convey the news, only to be informed that the pack meant to kill Bella and the monster she carried. Though Jacob was as disgusted with the pregnancy as anyone, he couldn't kill Bella. In order to protect her, he was forced to give up his place in the pack and assist in protecting those he'd rather call enemies. His unique bloodline made him specially suited to resist Sam. Sam was the alpha, but only because Jacob had allowed him this position. The Blacks had the true claim to leadership, something which literally coursed through their blood, enabling Jacob to assume the role of an alpha wolf. Jacob couldn't take over Sam's pack, but he could strike out on his own, and others, as soon proven by Leah and Seth, could choose to follow him instead. It was an unprecedented event. There had never been two packs and two alphas to lead them, but the wolves' numbers, owing to the large size of the Cullen family, were also greater than ever. Jacob lost the ability to communicate with his former packmates, though he could still have telepathic communications with Sam on a one-on-one basis. When Leah and Seth joined Jacob, acting as his third and second respectively, they also lost the ability to communicate with Sam's pack, instead only being able to converse with their new leader, Jacob. Seth joined in hopes of doing the right thing, while for Leah, the space away from Sam, her former leader and ex, was a reprieve. Originally, Jacob planned to destroy the baby, only to imprint on it instead. Neither scenario was exactly flattering for his character, as many felt it was a choice between murdering a child or grooming her. Controversy aside, though, Jacob's imprinting nullified the war between Sam's pack and the Cullens. The wolves had a handful of laws, the most important of which was that no one, intentional or otherwise, would hurt an imprintee. This is because to do so, it would destroy the werewolf in question. When a werewolf imprints on someone, he is finding his soulmate. Therefore, his pain would be absolute, and, owing to the telepathic connection within the pack, felt by all. With the hatchet buried, Jacob discovered that he couldn't go back. What was done was done. He was forever an alpha wolf, having taken his blood right, and so he ran a pack of his own, coordinating with Sam as needed. The pack had its share of scandals, of course. While the love triangle between Sam, Emily, and Leah was the greatest of them, Jacob was caught in his own triangle of sorts. His feelings for Bella aside, he had to grapple with the idea that Embry, his best friend, could also be his brother. This is because Embry's mother, though indigenous, had no wolf blood, meaning that Embry's father could only be one of 3 people: Joshua Uli, Quillatira Sr., or Billy Black himself. While Joshua, who had run out on Sam's family, seemed like the most likely contender, the boys never knew for sure. Therefore, Quill, Sam, or Jacob could have been Embry's brother. Despite his frustration with the temperamental Paul, Jacob also had to put up with him as a brother-in-law, as Rachel, on visiting home on school holidays, was imprinted on by Paul. Rachel eagerly returned Paul's affections, leaving Jacob to tolerate Paul lounging on his couch and eating most of the food in his house. With the threat of the Valkyrie looming, both Jacob's pack and Sam's joined the Cullens to protect Renesmee, as her being Jacob's imprintee made her a part of both families. Throughout their preparations, the Cullens invited more vampires, including those who hunted humans, into the area to act as their witnesses. With so many vampires present, even those with only a smattering of shapeshifter blood transformed. With numbers reaching double digits, Jacob's choice became a blessing. So many wolves would have been overwhelming for Sam to lead, but the wolves, including some as young as 13, could be spread between the alphas, providing each with a healthy pack. Between Bella's gifts, Alice's testimony, the witnesses they'd gathered, and even the shock of the shapeshifter's appearance, the Valkyrie were forced to retreat. With the departure of the Valkyrie, both Bella and Jacob learned a startling truth: that Jacob wasn't a werewolf at all, but a shapeshifter with the characteristics of a wolf. The children of the moon are traditional werewolves, transforming during full moons. They were nearly destroyed by the Valkyrie, particularly because of Caius's fear of them, the result of the Valkyrie rulers nearly being killed by one. It's shocking news to Bella and Jacob, but it doesn't take away from their role as supernatural beings. While there's the implication that Jacob and Renesmee will be together someday, a plot twist which remains controversial, the appearance of Nahul, the only male of Renesmee's kind, also indicates the girl could be caught up in a love triangle when she's older. Jacob's age, while he continues to phase, is frozen, and while he has no desire for anything romantic until she's an adult, the fact they are essentially engaged left readers, and even Bella herself, weirded out. In conclusion, Jacob's life story isn't complicated, but he had his share of earlier tragedies. He lost his mother at the age of 9, and in not only looking after his father, but in phasing when he was only 16, He had to grow up too quickly, literally, as he explains to Bella that, physically, he might as well be 25. It's not the purpose of this video to debate the imprinting controversy, but when it comes to pre-Renesmee Jacob, I've always been firmly Team Jacob. I never hated Edward, but for me, I always felt like Jacob and Bella, just as two people, had more common interests. Bella actually enjoys hanging out in the garage and riding motorcycles. She has a human bond with Jacob before his transformation, and he helps her through a dark patch Edward never had to witness outside of memories. If Bella had chosen Jacob, something she acknowledges she would have done in an ordinary world, much of the heartbreak and controversy would have been avoided. Bella would have aged, but Jacob, in giving up his phasing, would have had the choice to age with her, and together they might have led a relatively normal life. Alas, Bella ultimately chose Edward, while Jacob, if not exactly making the choice, is destined to be with her daughter. It's a weird plot twist, to say the least, but one can't fault Meyer for creativity, and us on Team Jacob can only wonder what could have been. Do you think Bella should have picked Jacob? Do you think Renesmee will ultimately choose someone else? Sound off in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and happy reading.